Good morning, everybody. How are we doing? Good? Tired? Are you kidding me? This is the beginning of the new month. Wait till the end of the month. Then I'll ask you again. We'll see how you're doing. You'll be wishing you were right. You'll be wishing you were right here in terms of tired, because it only gets worse. All right. All right. So, welcome to lecture 2. We're going to get into some more ideas that we are grading on, like form. Let's see. No, we talked about shape and form last time. We're going to get into proportion and scale. The differences there; those are important. We're going to delve into some important sort of house cleaning things that we do, freezing transformations, naming our geometry, things like that. And we're going to delve into some concepts of what we call blocking out, where we're changing the shapes of objects a little bit. And we're also using simple polygon primitives to occupy the shape and form of the objects that we're trying to create. Kind of like the idea that when we were trying to draw something, we start with light sketches. It sort of works the same way. So we're just trying to represent the shape and form that we see with simple primitives. And it's really just an exercise in helping you get better in terms of your mastery of the tools. So for those of you who are freaked out by Mr. Potato Head, like Stephanie, you get a little bit more of an opportunity to play with that and see kind of how it works. And again, that critical element of utilizing your orthographic views, both of them in conjunction, to make sure you're lining things up right, because you do need to make sure it looks good in both. Then you know you're good to go in 3D. What else is new and exciting? Oh, you guys will be very excited to hear that I'm in the No Cavity Club. That's right. I went to the, thank you, Brian. I know Brian was worried. Yes. But yeah, went to the dentist yesterday. They were very happy because I got in and out of the chair in like 45 minutes because I brushed so well, they told me. So, yeah, clean, thank you. No Cavity Club. So I immediately went to a gas station and bought a huge bag of Swedish fish, and I ate the whole thing myself in celebration of taking care of my teeth. So, yeah, that was pretty fun. All right. So, let's delve into today's material, and here's to hoping you guys have clean dental records also. Well, just because I've determined that dental work is like the last bastion of really hosing you financially, because apparently nothing is covered by your dental insurance, other than like routine cleanings and what have you. If they have to do anything, you're paying for it. So in my part-time, I'm going to be a dentist. All right, proportion and scale. I should have been a dentist. In proportion and scale. In terms of proportion, I got a hell yeah. Yeah, dentistry pays. There's some coin in there. All right, proportion and scale. What is critically important about these two things is they sound simple and they sound similar, but they're actually quite different. So we're going to put a little bit of a distinguishing element on this for you so that you can separate the two. Proportion is when we are comparing parts of an object to other parts of the same object. And this is how we determine proportion. For example, sometimes when we're measuring people, we say that people are 7 to 7.5 heads tall, the head being the unit of measurement. And we can figure out the relative proportions of other aspects of the body as a result of that. For example, the space between your eyes, if you're unsure, perhaps your reference is not ideal, but the distance between your eyes is typically 1 eye in width. So if you're unsure, you can always check that. Now, granted, there are some people whose eyes are closer together, and there are some people whose eyes are further apart, but most of us fit within the bell curve of 1 eye width distance. Another really handy proportion is the fact that your forearm is typically the length of your foot. So again, these are little things that you can pick up that will help you understand relative proportion when you're modeling something that perhaps you don't have the best of reference for and you have to make a call. So these proportions are kind of sort of high cards you can go to. And proportion can even help you with identification of what you're looking at. Last class we were talking about the importance of shape and form and how we have to be able to hit silhouette immediately. Job 1 of the modeler, recognition of what it is you've modeled. Well, proportion can help you identify what you're looking at. For example, the difference between male and female body. Typically, males are broader in the shoulder and narrower in the hips. Females tend to be narrower in the shoulders and broader in the hips. Again, there's people on both sides of that spectrum that fall outside of the bell curve, but most of us fit in right through there. So just from silhouette and form, when your proportions are correct, you can determine gender. And again, identification of what you're looking at, that's job one as a modeler. So that can really help out a lot. So as a result, is proportion an aspect that we are grading on? Hell yeah, that's right, it is. Proportion is something we are grading on. So for example, if you take a look, this is my reference image here. This is what I'm trying to build. These two lamps here are close enough in terms of their proportion that they would earn the proportion points for the assignment. If you look at these lamps here, these are too different, too far off in terms of proportion, and then they wouldn't earn the proportion points associated with the assignment. Now, when you look at these, you see in terms of what's okay and what's not a lot of latitude. You got to be pretty close. Now, the good news is we're going to be, excuse me, we're going to be using image planes to help us model, which will take away a lot of the pressure of hitting proportion because we're going to be matching images as we model. But still, just the same, something to be aware of. A critical aspect of replicating the object is making sure you've got the correct proportions. Any questions on proportion? That idea? Okay. Yeah, it's a fairly straightforward one, but it bears asking. Okay, so scale. What's it? Oh, you had a proportion question? Go ahead. Well, what we're going to be using is image planes as a guide. So as a result, if you match the proportions of the image plane, odds are very good it's going to work well, depending on the quality of the image plane. Because you know, an illustration, let's say we're using that as an image plane, illustrations are drawn by people. So it can be flawed inherently because it's a human that's doing it. There is no such thing as perfection. If we're talking about a photograph, you get into issues where, since basically to take an image, what we're doing, and it doesn't matter whether we're talking old school or digital, we're taking light, we're bringing it into a lens, and we're bending it to fit it onto a plane to capture the image. So as a result, there is a distortion going on there. So you get into parallax issues depending on the length of the lens you're using, the proximity of the camera to the subject matter that you're taking the picture of, and the angle that you're taking the picture of. All of that can affect the image plane and therefore throw off relative proportions. So there are variables you have to be cognizant of. But again, as you get more experience, you start to realize, okay, you know, the reference image is the truth, but not necessarily the whole truth and nothing but the truth, so help me modeling. Does that make sense? So you kind of have to, you have to be a little bit of a detective and say, these don't really fit the way the picture's showing it, and then you have to make it work. Does that make sense? Okay, that's a great question, and that does happen, and it's frustrating. The better the reference is, the less of that you have to do, and that's why we love good reference. We'll talk about that later on. But that's a terrific question. All right, let's talk a little bit about scale. Scale is an issue that comes into play when we start to bring our assets together. This is very important because when it comes to building an environment or a scene or whatever it is we're doing, you don't build a room. Let's say, for example, I wanted to model this room and everything in it. I don't build the room and then build the desks and then build the light and then build Brian and then build the camera and then just everything is in that room. Every single element in this room will be in a separate Maya file. And then ultimately all those files will be imported into one master file, Gesundheit, and that's how we build the scene. Does that make sense? So scale becomes critically important because if you've got 100 people working on a project, we need to make sure they're all building using the same scale so that everything is the right size relative to each other, because that is the definition of scale. We are comparing objects to other objects versus proportion, where we're comparing parts of an object to other parts of the same object. So in this instance, we're looking at different objects. So for example, if you look at this image of tugboats, you might not know, are these toy tugboats or are these real tugboats? How many of you guys think they're toy tugboats? Go ahead, vote. Don't be a chicken. All right. How many of you think they're toy tugboats? Did I say that one already? Toy tugboats the first time. Real tugboats the second time. Who thinks they're real tugboats? Just me and Brian? Really? Oh, don't play the middle. These are toy tugboats. They're remote control. They have them at SeaWorld. You can drive them around. But the problem is, based on this image, it's difficult to determine the relative scale because what we need is something else to compare it to. So once we have a second object that we recognize, you go, oh, okay, all right. Either these guys are really, really small or that guy's ginormous. So now scale starts to make sense. We good on that? The difference between proportion, parts of an object compared to other parts of the same object versus scale, where we're looking at one object compared to another one. Now, again, as I said before, where it comes into play is when we start bringing assets together in a final environment. So if this is my final scene with all of the assets, when I reproduce it here, the relative scale of all the pieces is very close, if not dead on, to the environment in its totality from that reference image. And it becomes very obvious when things are not in the correct scale. Does that make sense? Those lamps are way too small. That ice decanter is huge. The picture is way too small. Does that make sense? Everything looks wrong. And that's because the scale is off. So again, as I was alluding to before, where this becomes a big ticket item is when we start bringing everything together into a final scene. So when you guys are building your objects, ultimately, we talked about the idea that it's going to be put in a final scene, a still life, right? All the stuff that you built, and we're going to make a nice little scene with it. Well, that's why we have to have the same relative scale for everything that we build. And here's the critical aspect for you to understand about the relative sizes of objects. Just because your image plane, the photograph you're using to help you build something, is this big, that doesn't mean the object you're building is this big. That doesn't mean it's the right size already. Does that make sense? Because I can take a picture of the Empire State Building and then put that picture in my pocket. The Empire State Building does not fit in my pocket, but that picture sure does. Does that make sense? So just because the image plane is a certain size within Maya, that does not mean it's the right size. We have to make an adjustment. After we're done building the object, we make a change in the size to make it the correct scale for the project. Now, what's the scale for the project? Every project you work on will have a different scale. That kind of information is going to be determined by your supervisors, and you'll be told what the scale is so that everybody's working on the same one. But for our class, for our project, what we're doing, 1 grid unit in Maya is equal to 1 inch. All right? 1 grid unit in Maya is equal to 1 inch. So if you've got an object that's 5 inches tall, it's going to be represented by 5 grid units in Maya. So let's take a quick look at Maya so you can see what I'm talking about. Here you are, Maya. So if I've got an object that's 5 grid units tall, 5 inches tall, it's going to be 5 grid units. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So after I'm done building it, I make sure it's the correct size. Does that make sense? Okay, now, in terms of determining how do I figure out how big an object is, because that's the next thing. If you are my local class, you have the benefit of being in the room with the objects. Remember that little box of toys that Marcus and Sarah brought in? They're in there. Literally, you can measure them. But you can also use the image planes or the reference images that we're going to be modeling from. So for example, let's say you were building this week's assignments, and I go to the asset file folder, your level 1 assets. Let's say you decided to build the ladybug, right? You will notice that within the ladybug file, there's a folder called source images. That's where your reference image is. That's where we placed it. You don't have to do anything. It's in there for you. But if you look in that folder, you'll see there's a bunch of images in there. And each of these images is intended to help you build the thing you're building by showing you different angles of it so that you can use that as reference. So for example, if you take a look at this image, you'll see that the ladybug is, there's like a grid behind it. And the ladybug is 3 1/4 grid units high. But what you have to realize is the grids in this image are not the same as the grids in Maya. These grids are half. So what you're going to have to do is double the value. So if this is 3 1/4, that means you're looking at 6 1/2 when you bring it into Maya. Does that make sense? 2 grid units in the picture equals 1 grid unit in Maya. So if you're trying to determine how big to make an object after you finish building it, that's how you figure it out. Does that make sense? Get a hell yeah on that? That was the worst hell yeah ever. Come on, this is day 2. Hell yeah? Hell yeah. There we go. There's my marginally lucid class. Welcome back. All right. So again, knowing the right scale is important. And by the way, do you think that's something I'm grading on? Of course, of course. I do not waste my time or your time with anything that you are not being graded on, and therefore, as a result, is important. 1 grid unit, 1 inch. All right, let's talk about layers. Layers are an extremely helpful aspect of Maya. As I alluded to last class, the layers in Maya are a lot like the layers in Photoshop. Not quite as powerful and cool as Photoshop, but it does the same thing. The idea that I can create layers, put objects on layers, and I can hide layers and show layers and template layers and lock layers and all stuff like that so that I can avoid touching things I don't want to, moving things I don't want to, that kind of idea. So the purpose of that layers in Maya for our class is going to be largely organizational. So let's take a look at how do we make a layer and the important aspects of it. So let's say, for example, I'm in here in Maya and I build a sphere, and it's the best sphere I've ever made, and I'd like to make a layer for it so that I can keep it separate from other things. The first thing I'm going to do is make sure I have the channel box open. And in terms of the channel box, we're talking about this icon right here. That launches the channel box. You want to make sure you've got that launched. Okay. Now, when the channel box has been opened, you'll notice I can see the layer editor down here. That's this section. These are the steps for the creation of a layer. Step 1, you go to the part where it says layers, you click on it with the left mouse button and you choose create empty layer. This will make a brand new layer for you. All right. Now, step 2, double click on the layer. This will allow you to name the layer. You must name the layer to get credit for the creation of a layer. If it's not named, you didn't create a layer. It's not doing its job. So make sure you name it. And all you have to do is highlight the area here and type in anything that makes sense, but give it a name. All right, sphere layer. Save it. So now I've got this layer called sphere. However, at this point, it doesn't really do anything. I created a layer, but there's nothing in it at the moment. So what I want to do is I want to add this sphere to that layer. So the next step is with the layer highlight, okay, that's when it's blue like this, you just hold down the right mouse button and say add selected objects, because you'll notice my sphere is currently selected because it's lit up green, right? So if it wasn't selected, it would look like that. So I select the object, right mouse button, add selected object. Now the sphere is on the sphere layer. And the way I know it's on there is because when I go to this very first box, which is the visibility box, this works like the eyeball in Photoshop. If I click it off, the sphere disappears. If I click it on, the sphere reappears. This is a named and fully functional layer. Layers are something that we are grading on. Layers are something we're looking for. If it is not named and it doesn't work, it's not a layer. Does that make sense? You should have one layer for each object. Now, if you've built an object and it is made of several pieces, all those pieces go on one layer. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Okay. So that's how you create a layer. That is a layer that you will get full credit for. So make sure you do that. All right. Let's talk a little bit about polygons. Now, in terms of stuff to build things out of, there's a lot of different materials you can work with. Subdivisions, NURBS, polygons. This is primarily a polygon modeling class, so we're going to talk mostly about those. But what we need to do is kind of talk a little bit about these polygons so that we understand how they work. Much like if this was a woodworking class, we would kind of discuss the different types of woods because that's what we're going to be working with. We would discuss concepts of cutting with and against the grain and how that affects what it is you're, does that make sense? How you would make something. You need to understand the material you're working with. And this is a material. All right, first of all, a polygon is a geometric construct. It's the oldest of the geometric constructs, the first one they came up with. And it is referred to as a polygon. It's referred to as geometry. It's referred to as a mesh. There's a lot of different names, and that's why it can get confusing a little bit. But this is a polygon mesh. This is geometry. And this is what we're talking about, and this is what we're going to be working with. In fact, we often talk about a single face of a polygon as a polygon as well, which only adds to the confusion. But all of these terms are talking about the same thing: mesh, geometry, polygons. Now, polygons actually come in two modes: object mode and what we call component mode. Components are the smaller pieces that come together to make the larger thing. So for example, me as a whole entity, Steve, singular object. However, there are millions of cells that come together to make Steve. So the components of Steve are cells. Other components of Steve are organs. You know, these are all things that come together to make me. So you can either deal with me, the summation, or all the stuff that I'm made of. Does that make sense? Polygons work the same way. Polygons, you have object mode, and that's where you're dealing with a sphere, a cube, a cone, or whatever. But we also have these components within the polygon object. And the three component sizes are the vertice is the smallest one. And the vertice, or the vertex, is basically a point in space that defines shape. The whole purpose of the vertice is to help us describe shape and form. Vertice, points in space that describe shape. If you have two vertices, 2 points in space that describe shape, Maya will draw a straight line between them, and that's kind of the rule of polygons. Got to have a straight line between 2 points. Between these 2 points, and that's called an edge. Edge, the line that connects 2 points in space. If you have at least 3 points, Maya will connect those points to each other using edges, and then it can shade that surface in, and that's called a face. A face, also called a polygon, confusingly enough. And these are all ways to describe the components or the smaller aspects of the larger thing, the polygon geometry. Now, the reason this is important, you turn that down a little bit? Thank you, no worries. Let's take a look at polygons in action, because they're pretty cool. All right. So let me get this guy going. All right. Now, when I select a cube, a polygon cube, it is in object mode. And I know it's in object mode because it's green when it's selected. That means object. However, I can get to the component modes if I wish by holding down my right mouse button over the geometry with my cursor. You notice my cursor's over, not out here, not over there, not over here, over the geometry. Hold down my right mouse button, and I get a circular menu set over this larger rectangular one. We're going to concentrate on the circular one. If we hold down our cursor over the geometry, hold down the right mouse button, you will see vertex or vertice. Now, as soon as I do that, my geometry changes color. What color is it now? Don't be shy. Blue. It's a light blue color, right? Light blue is an indication of component mode. That's what's telling me I'm in component mode, not object mode. all right? And you'll notice when I'm in object mode, I see the name of the object. There's information in the channel box. When I go to component mode, nothing in there. Does that make sense? I'm dealing with the parts that make this thing. Now, so I've got everything's light blue, which is an indication of component mode, and I see these cute pinkish purple dots at all the corners, right? These are the vertices, or the vertex. Now, in terms of changing the shape of an object, all I have to do is select a vertex and then use my move tool, and I can change the position of the vertex, and as a result, it changes the shape of the object. Now, if I want to, I can select one vertice, hold Shift, which is add to selection, and select a second one, and then I can move two of them at once. I can also, if I want to, create a selection box. Okay, this is called marquee selection. If you hold down the left mouse button and drag, you create a selection box, and whatever is within that box will be selected. So I can grab two of them at once that way. But be aware, when it comes to selecting polygon components, you can select not only all the components you can see inside that box, you also select some in the back that you can't see. Selection does not respect the physicality of polygons, so you can select things you can't even see. So just be aware, when you're making selections, I can select everything I can see, but I'm also getting some stuff that I can't see. So just be aware of that. Now, again, in terms of changing the shape, I can move, I can scale, I can rotate. All of these things change the shape of the object by manipulating the components. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, so those are the vertices. Now, I can also hold down the right mouse button and go straight up to edge mode. Once I'm in edge mode, what does it look like? What color is it? Don't be shy. What color is it? Light blue, right? All right. What does light blue mean? Component mode. Absolutely. So I know I'm still in a component mode. Do I still see the pinkish purple dots? No, those are gone. The vertices are no longer visible. But what I can do now that I could not do before is I can select an edge, which I couldn't get before. And again, I can move it, right? I can rotate it. I can scale it. But the difference here is when I move an edge, what am I also moving? The vertices on either side. Does that make sense? So an edge is kind of a bigger change to the object because I'm moving more components. Okay, things to think about. Now, in terms of the polygon, again, I hold down my right mouse button and I choose face mode. Once I go into face mode, I have the ability to select the shaded surface in the middle. And again, I can scale it. I can rotate it. Right? I can move it. Pump up that bass. Does that make sense? Okay, so vertices, edges, and faces, all components I can manipulate, all geared around helping me change the shape of the object. Now, excuse me, you might ask, why do I need so many components? It's kind of confusing. What difference does it make? Excuse me. We need smaller components to make finer changes, larger components to make larger changes. How many of you guys have ever painted a room before? You ever done interior painting? I hate interior painting. But if you've ever done it, you know what I'm talking about. When you're painting a wall, what do you use to paint the wall? Aside from the paint, there's always somebody who says dog. Aside from the paint, what else do you use to paint the wall? A paintbrush? Or how many of you guys use rollers? Roller, right? You can do it with a paintbrush. It depends on the look you're going for. But most of us use rollers because that slaps a lot of paint on the wall very quickly so you can get done because you don't want to do this, right? So, point being, big roller, lots of paint on the wall, fast, get done. Big change. All right. Now, a lot of walls have cute little molding, right? Either at the bottom or the top. Expensive ones have it on the top. Mostly it's at the bottom. Now, aside from having to use a different paint, because molding is typically gloss, not matte or flat, aside from having to use a different kind of paint, can I use a roller on the molding down there at the bottom? I can. It's possible. It's going to be messy. I'm going to get paint on the walls. I'm going to get paint on the rug. I'm going to get sent to the naughty corner, right, for making a mess. It's much easier to use a medium-sized brush, right? Or there's really cool foam ones. You've seen those cool foam ones on a stick? Those are great for molding, right? But can I paint the wall with one of those things? Again, I could. It's going to take a long time, so I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use that medium-sized brush for that. Now, let's say I'm painting the windowsill, right? Trying to get fine amounts of paint on there. I don't want to get it on the glass. I mean, granted, I'm going to use a razor blade to touch it up later, and I'm going to put down the painter's tape. But if I'm trying to get that paint on mostly the windowsill and not the glass, can I use that medium-sized brush? No, it's not going to work. I'm going to get too much paint on the glass. I'm not going to be able to keep that clean. So the difference is when I'm painting, when I need fine control, I use a small brush. And when I'm trying to do a lot of change, I use a big brush or a roller. Components are the same idea. We got to make sure that we are using the right component to make the change we want to make, because otherwise it could take forever to make an adjustment. Efficiency and speed. We're creating art, that's the given, but we have to do it quickly. And that's why we have these different component levels. Because if you're trying to paint a wall using that little brush, you're going to be in there a long time. Does that make sense? Okay. So different components, because we are making different amounts of changes at a different rate of speed. And as I said, polygons between 2 points, you have to have a straight line between them. All right, you guys want to do a little activity and have some fun with these guys? Oh, I knew you'd be excited. All right, so we're about to do an activity. You see the Marcus, Sarah, and Steve characters on the activity, and that means we're going to do what? What's the first thing we do? Come on, you set the project. I knew somebody would come up with it. Good for you guys. Set the project. Critical. Mission 1. As soon as you launch Maya, the next thing you do is you set the project to whatever it is you're working on. Now, make sure you've downloaded the activity file folder, because that's what we want to set our project to, because that's what we want to work on. So watch me as I do it. And believe me, this is such a silly and straightforward process, but if you don't do it exactly like I'm showing you, it's not going to work. You're going to have problems. Trust me. So make sure you're watching me if you're not sure what I'm talking about. First, I'm going to set my project. And the way I do that is I'm here in Maya, and I go to File, Set Project. That's step 1. All right. Now, in my Documents folder, I have a folder called 3DF. So I have everything in there that I'm going to do this month. And you'll see I've got my activity file folder that I downloaded from FSO. So I select it. One click. You don't have to go into it. One click. Just select it. And hit Set. So now Maya knows what I want to work on. So then when I go to File, Open Scene, because setting the project and opening a file are two totally different things. When I go to File, Open Scene, I immediately go into my 3DF folder, into my activity files, into the Scenes folder, and Maya says, what do you want to work on? I'm ready to do activities with you. What do you want to do? So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the one called Edge Flow activity. Now, if you set your project properly, when you open this file, you will see cubes. They could be colored like this, or they might be gray. We're going to talk about that in a second. But the important thing is you will see this gray image in the background. That is an indication of you set your project properly. If you open this file and you see a big empty pink box with a big pink X through the middle of it, you did not set your project properly. Does that make sense? The image planes will not load if you didn't set your project. If you got the pink box, go back and set your project again. File, Set Project. Choose the activity file folder specifically. One click, don't go into it, and choose Set. then reopen the file. File open scene. Does that make sense? If you do it right, the pictures will populate and you'll be ready to do your job. If you are missing one step or you didn't do something right, you're not going to see the pictures. Make sense? Okay. Now, the way this activity works, like most modeling, we work with the orthographic views. Perspective is when we're actually getting into the rendering phase for the most part and touch up. But mostly we're going to be over here in the orthographic views. So if you go to your front view camera by putting your cursor over that window and hitting the space bar, now that window is bigger. And incidentally, if your boxes are all gray, that's totally fine. Don't worry. You are currently in what we call shaded mode. If you press 4, the number 4 on your keyboard, you enter wireframe mode. Wireframe mode is kind of like a 3D blueprint. 5 on your keyboard is shaded mode, and that's where it looks like a solid object. So don't worry if you're seeing everything in shaded mode. Just hit 4 and you're in wireframe. Now, what I'm going to do is navigate my way to the upper left-hand corner piece of geometry. If you don't have a mouse or a pen yet, get one! But if you don't have a mouse or a pen yet, select the geometry and press F on your keyboard, as in Frank, and that will frame whatever it is you have selected. Does that make sense? So that is a bit of a helper. You're still going to be in a living hell because you don't have a mouse or a pen yet, but it will at least get you into the ballpark. Now, in terms of the geometry, what you will see is that we have a picture with some lines on it. And those lines represent the edge flow, or the way the edges move across the surface of our objective, what we want it to do, what we want it to look like. Edge flow, you will learn, is critically important. More on that as we go. But at this point, this is my geometry, and it does not match the edge flow that we want. So what we're going to do is make an adjustment to the edge flow by moving the components. So first thing we have to do is get into component mode. How do I do that? Right-click over the geometry. Now, here's the tricky part. We are in wireframe mode, which means if I put my cursor over a space, I am not over the geometry. I am over the image plane. So if I hold down the right mouse button, you will see information about the image plane. Does that make sense? So what I want to do is make sure I'm on a line. Then I'm physically on the geometry. Right mouse button, choose vertex or edge or face, your call. It becomes light blue to tell me that I am in component mode. And now I can select a component, switch to my move tool, and then move the component. And as I move the components, I am changing the edge flow of my geometry, because you have to have a straight line connecting these things to each other. I can even grab more than one at once. I can grab 2 and move it. Grab 1 and move it. I can move, I can scale, I can rotate, anything I want to move those components around. I can use faces, I can use edges, I can use vertices. It doesn't make any difference. But the objective is to move the component so that the edge flow of the geometry matches the illustration behind it. Does that make sense? Get a hell yeah? Okay, what I'd like you guys to do is do the first 2 pieces of geometry on each layer. So for example, or each level. So what you'll do is move the components on these 2, then move on these 2, then move on these 2, and when you get to the bottom row, this is where we're Trichiosaurus, because we're in 3D at this point. Things are more complicated. So be sure to look at this little picture in the corner, because that's showing you a 3/4 view of what you're looking at. That is a hint as to what you have to do. The edge flow will still match the drawing, but you're going to need this image to help you see what we're going for in terms of the 3D. Because when we get down to that bottom row, we're looking at 3D cubes, whereas before we're looking at 2D geometry planes, a little bit easier, right? Once we start working in 3D, it becomes a little bit more tricky. Tricky. So at this point, what's going to happen is Brian and I are going to walk around and see how you guys are doing. Make sure you're having some success with this. So give it your best shot, and we'll see how we're doing. All righty. Yes. Oh, okay. Well, hang on 1 second. I'll be right around to look at it. All right. How we doing?
It's actually kind of dumb, but I don't know how to get it centered.
Okay, that's all right. First off, hit your space bar because you're not in your front view, you're in your perspective view. You want to be here.
Oh, okay. That's kind of
No,
dumb.
no, no. Just need experience. There's a big difference between dumb and inexperienced. And it makes all the difference in the world. There you go. Got it?
Yep.
Good? All right, how are we doing?
Like the best vertex in the world. This vertex,
Mm-hmm.
I just cannot delete it. I don't know why. And it deletes right as soon as
That's because I'm looking. That's what happens. Whenever an instructor looks. It's all right.
Have you ever seen that happen? Do you know what would cause that?
Sometimes it just won't go, and typically what I'll do in that instance is merge it with the merge tool.
I was clicking on merge, but it would like take a bunch of vertexes and
No. You just want to select the ones that you want to merge it to. You might want to V-snap it from one to the other and then merge it. Yep. No. But that's why you're here. If you knew what you were doing, we wouldn't talk. So we're all here to learn. Good job. Oh, you got that one?
I already finished.
Sweet. Let me see this one. Yeah. Yep. Select it and just hit F. There you go, and hit 5. Okay, cool. And let me see it in 3/4 perspective. Hit F again. Up here. There you go. Press F and then shade it with 5. There you go. Awesome. Terrific. Good job. Oh, no? Okay. Yeah. No, that looks terrific. Nice job. Yep. You want to move the components to match the lines. So hover your cursor over the geometry, right mouse button, which because you're using the trackpad like a naughty person, 2 fingers. Okay. Get that mouse or use your pen. You have one of those already.
I put that project onto my stuff. I can find it. I think it's here, and the stuff is empty. I don't know why.
I don't see it. Where's your folder? The one you downloaded.
Here. So
Right.
activity files, scenes, here. Oh.
See?
Okay.
Just set your project to the outer folder.
Like, I did it before and it was
You might have looked in a different folder. Yes.
I have an interesting issue with these faces right here. So I thought deleting the faces would work, but that's not working. So the edges aren't going away. Because what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to merge them, but it seems like there's multiple edges stacked up on each other.
It could be.
Yeah,
It could be. Well, or not necessarily. It might not be edges. It might be faces is the issue. And that's why you can't delete them.
Here, when I take edge flow, it's empty.
Yes, because first you have to set your project. You remember I was telling you got to do this stuff in order and you have to do it the right way. So first close this. Close it. File, set project. It's all right.
Set project.
Now, where's your folder? It's on your desktop.
Yeah.
Select it. Where's your activity file folder?
Activity.
Yes.
I haven't here. Did I miss one of the folder?
You have level 1, level 2, level 3. I don't see your activity file folder. Where'd you put that one?
What if?
Because you had it just a second ago.
Uh-huh.
But I don't see it there. Ah, there you
so
go.
It's inside.
All right, so select that, 1 click, and hit set.
Oh, okay, because I was double clicking.
Yes, no. Now go to File, Open Scene, and now it will work. That's what I was saying. It's very specific the way you got to do it, or it doesn't work. Yes.
When you were doing the demo, like
Yep.
mine was freezing up.
Mm-hmm.
So like I don't understand what we're supposed to do. Like we're supposed to.
Yep, you're supposed to be moving the components.
Alright, so like this right here.
That will help you. Yep, but you want to do this first one up here because they get harder as you go down. Or this one, far left. All right, now what did I say to frame stuff? What key do we press to get over to where one thing is specifically?
Right click it.
Nope, we hit F to frame it. All right, so now it's visible. Now, we talked about wireframe versus shaded mode. Do you remember what those keys were?
No, like Maya has made my computer slower, so I have to delete some stuff.
Okay, well, it doesn't have to do really with the computer speed. It has to do with you not having the information you need to do your job. Can you show me the notes you were taking while I was talking?
I didn't take any notes.
Okay, and that's exactly why you don't know what to do. Do you remember me talking about that the first day?
Yeah.
Because what happens is I give you guys very explicit instructions, and if you don't have it, you can't do the work. And it's got nothing to do with smart. It's got nothing to do with creativity. But what it does have to do with is knowing the many steps it takes to do this work. Does that make sense? So the good news is, on the very first activity, you have already realized, I can't not take notes. It's not going to work. This is not high school 2.0. We're playing for keeps now. You know what I mean? So you've got to write stuff down. You got to take notes, and you got to ask questions, because that's how you're going to learn. That's how you're going to get better at this, and that's how you have your best chance to be successful. Does that make sense? So again, good news, we found out early. That's great. I've had students who go the entire class and go, you know what? I'm not really a notes guy. You know, like, well, waiting till the last day to tell me that's not a good idea. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, if you need me to repeat something when I'm talking about it, I have no problem with that. If you need me to say it a different way because you don't understand it, I have no problem with that either. Does that make sense? All right. Now, as far as getting through this activity, 2 fingers on your keyboard, that'll give you right mouse button, or 2 fingers on your trackpad will give you right mouse button. Mm-hmm. Choose vertex. Now, if you go to 4, which is wireframe, you can see the drawing behind. And what I want you to do is select the components and then use the tools in your toolbox to move them and match the edge flow. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So move that stuff around. Yes.
First question is how to
Yep.
make the
Yeah. You didn't. Do you see how you've got this pink box here? You didn't set your project properly. Yeah, you got to do that if you're going to be able to see the image behind.
this way.
I don't know. What does that say? You have to tell me.
So
Well, do this for me. Well, let's set the project first, because that's critical, because we can't even get started without that. So show me, how do you set a project? Mm-hmm. All right, and where's your folder?
File for window new name.
So where is your folder, the activity file folder? Right there. Okay, now, we don't go into it. Go up arrow, the light blue arrow, up one. Select the activity file folder, 1 click, and then hit set. Now, file open scene. And choose edge flow.
Every time you do that.
Every time you change it to a different thing you want to work on, you have to tell Maya first what you're working on. Now you want edge flow activity.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Don't save. Continue. Okay. Okay. Now the picture's in there.
And another question is.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You have to set your project or that's not going to populate.
Okay. How to move it? Because I
Okay,
don't have
well,
the middle click.
Right. Well, you want them. You got to have a mouse or a pen tablet, or your pen and your tablet.
I forgot that.
Okay. You got to bring that stuff. You know what I mean? It's like leaving your head at home. It's not going to work, right?
I don't know.
Now, in terms of trying to get through today, First off, we don't model a lot in the perspective view. We use our orthographic views. So what I want you to do is go to an orthographic view, like your front view. How do you change views? Right. Now come over here. Okay. Now, do you remember wireframe versus shaded? Wireframe mode versus shaded mode.
What?
4 is wireframe. So now you can see the picture. You want to work on this one, so select it and press F.
Like it?
Press F. So now we're close. Now how do you get to component mode?
I think 1, 2, 3. In Max, it works. I'm not sure
Right
in
mouse
Maya.
button.
In Max.
That's okay. But we're not learning Max. We're learning Maya. Okay, so to forget what you know about Max, other than the fact that 3D is 3D, so it doesn't matter what application you're using, but don't try to turn one into the other.
How to edit?
Right mouse button, over the geometry, 2 fingers, you have to be over the geometry. You're over the image plane. Come over here, put it right on top of a line. Right mouse button is 2 fingers straight down and hold it.
Oh, okay.
Vertex. All right, here, you've got your soft select activated. All right, now grab a vertex and move it. Do you see how that changes where the edges go?
Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Does that make sense? All right, now, it's great that you know 3D. I'm very happy that you know 3D Studio Max. You are also going to have to take notes in here, okay?
Really familiar with Maya.
I know, that's why you're here, to learn it. But if you don't write stuff down, you're not gonna pick it up as fast. You're gonna struggle,
I know.
okay? So you gotta get in the habit of taking notes.
I do know that.
And just like I was telling your partner here, I will say it slower if you need me to. I will say it again if you need me to. I have no problem with that. But you've got to write stuff down or you will struggle a lot. Okay? And I want you to do well, both of you. But you're going to have to work a little bit harder than you're used to working. Okay? How are you guys doing? Yes.
I'm not getting the painted box.
Right?
Yep.
Now, do you remember we were talking about wireframe versus shaded mode? What are those keys? Wireframe mode?
First of all, I didn't get the painted box. So
Yep. And that's what I'm telling you about. You remember we talked about wireframe and shaded mode? You press 4 for wireframe
yeah.
and 5 for shaded.
Okay. Oh. But
Yeah, I am answering your questions. You see? The key is, though, all you were missing was one little piece of information and you can't work.
Yeah, I missed it.
That's exactly, and that's what I'm saying. You got to write this stuff down because if you're missing one little piece, you can't do your job, and that's super frustrating. And it'll be like this when you're at home. You know what I mean? You'll be like, "Oh no, what was that one thing he said?" You know, and it'll drive you crazy. How are you doing? Okay. Did you set your project? So you got to find your activity file folder wherever it is. You downloaded it from FSL. No? Did you create a folder with your 3DF stuff in it? Okay. I don't see anything in there though. It just says test. Because you should have a folder called the activity file folder. And you downloaded that thing, right? That's your skill check. That's good, but you need the activity file folder also. Oh, back it up. You're going to want to go to Let's Get Started. There's a section called Let's Get Started. You're in week 1, so back it up a little bit. Back it up again. Keep going. There you go. Let's Get Started, class preparation. And you're going to want to find the activity file folder. You need that. So download it, and then you'll be able to get started, okay? I'll come back once you've got it. Good, good, good. How are we doing? Excellent. Good. Yeah, don't worry if it feels awkward and rough. That's okay. We're going to get better. Good, good, good. How are you doing? Yep, good. Okay. Do you have the activity file folder downloaded? Okay. Just, oh, okay, no worries. I just wanted to make sure, because anytime I see somebody without Maya up and running, I feel like, uh-oh, something's up. Oh, okay. Okay, good. Okay, make sure you download everything you need. That's critically important, having your stuff prepared. When you get to lab this afternoon, ask a lot of questions. What can do I have everything I need? Am I ready to go? Does that make sense? Make sure you're dialed in. All right, make sure you're right over the line. There you go. Right mouse button. There you go. Ooh, you had it. Choose vertex to the left. Up a little bit. That one. It turns blue. Oh, hold on. You have your soft select activated. There you go. Now click on one vertice. Click on it. Go ahead, just click. Left mouse button. Get it back. You can do it.
It's just so hard.
It's very hard. You got to feel. It's a touch thing. Right mouse button over the line. Right mouse button. Ooh, almost. Right on it. There you go. Choose vertex. There you go. Now select a vertice, any one of them. Just click on it with the left mouse button. Ooh, get over to it. All right, remember it's pressure sensitive, so if you put your finger on there, it's going to move it. So only the pen. All right, so now the vertice is selected. Now use your move tool. You got to move to the move tool right over here. Click it. Click it. Left mouse button here. All right, close that. Just hit the red button. Now it's selected with the move tool. Now use the arrows. No. Left mouse button on the arrows. There you go. And that's what moves it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a touch. You're going to have to learn that feel. With practice, you'll get the hang of it. And that's why we do these exercises. Good. Are you okay? How cold?
I joined the class late.
Okay.
This is my first day.
Okay.
So I'm just getting everything down.
Okay, no worries. Get everything downloaded and get yourself set. And when we get to lab, ask lots of questions. And you'll be good to go. There you go. You're getting the hang of it. Move it just a little bit. All right. So it looks like you guys have been doing pretty well overall with this activity. I'm very happy to see what I'm seeing. But a couple of instances where I'm seeing, and I'm hoping you're seeing, if you are missing one little piece of information, you can't move forward. You literally come to a brick wall and stop. And that's why I tell you guys, it doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how creative you are. It doesn't matter how fun you are or funny you are, although those things are helpful in life. You're not going to remember every little step. You need to write stuff down or you will find yourself unable to do your job. Does that make sense? And I cannot impress that upon you enough. Write stuff down, because I'm sure you felt the frustration when you're not able to execute in this activity. Imagine being at home where there's not somebody right there to help you and say, click this, click that, go here, go there. Because that's what's going to happen. You're going to be at home with nobody there to advise you on how to do this stuff, and you are going to feel extremely frustrated. Why do I not know this? Because I don't give you guys stuff to do that I didn't tell you how to do. So if you're trying to do something and it's not working, you missed a piece for sure. So what we're trying to figure out is what you missed. And a great suggestion is, if you have to ask an instructor for help, whether it's online or live, have a notebook with you. Write down the answers they give you, because that's probably something that's going to come up again. And you need to have that information because it's going to happen. The other thing that I would suggest very strongly is you guys should work together in teams. Whenever and wherever you're able to get together with friends and work together, it's going to go so much more smoothly because everybody remembers some of the process and you can sort of pool your knowledge, and it makes it so much easier. So just make friends, get together, order a pizza, and then everybody works on this stuff and you will make remarkable progress. Question in the back? Yep, absolutely. Work in a team. Go to that Google Hangout, because if you can't be with other people, that Google Hangout is basically other people. So you can ask them questions. There's instructors in there. Your peers are in there. You can get help from anybody. But the bottom line is you need help. You need it. So make sure you're writing stuff down and asking lots of questions. Alrighty, guys. So I hate to drag you away from what you're working on because I know you're having a lot of fun and you don't want to stop. But this activity, just like all the other activities I give you, are rungs on a ladder that will take you to where you need to be able to model. So anything that you struggled with, anything you had a hard time with, anything that was frustrating for you in the lecture, that's what you should be working on in the lab. Don't save your activities, just close them, because then you can start them again brand new every time. And if you need help, that's what we're here for. That's what the lab is for. That's what the Open Lab is for. That's what the Google Hangout is for. It's all designed to give you a little bit more one-on-one when you're struggling, because it is hard sometimes with some of these ideas and some of these tools. So make sure you're taking advantage of the help. And the first thing you can do is help yourself by writing stuff down. It makes a world of difference. All righty? But we need to get into some more material. But like I said, you can go back and work on these activities whenever you want. But first, we're going to talk about the blockout or primitive build. And this is something that we're going to do to, again, it's sort of reinforcement of using the tools in Maya, getting used to the mouse and clicking all the buttons and using all the different windows in Maya, because we need practice to get better at this stuff. So make sure you're able to do these activities. Now, the concept of the blockout is the idea that objects are made of much more more complex details. But each object or each detail is made of a more simple construct or volume. So even with very simple basic shapes, you can bring these things together and recreate a more complex object. So what we're going to do is use simple polygon primitives and move them around and manipulate them either by components or in object mode, and make these objects fit the shapes of the things we're trying to build. So for example, if you take a look at this pepper mill, there's a lot of very intricate details in this pepper mill in terms of the shape and form. And what I've done is I've created simple primitives. These are cylinders, they're just squashed down. This is a sphere that I squashed down. That's a sphere that I stretched out. All I did was move the components or reshape the object in object mode to try to match the silhouette of the object that I'm modeling. And basically I'm trying to fill the detail of the object using polygon primitives. And this is what we call, again, a blockout or a primitive build. So we have a fun little exercise for you guys to do. And it's basically a scene with a silhouette of a pencil, a chair, a mailbox, and a lamp. And what we're going to do is, using just simple polygon primitives, try to recreate the shape and form we see. Now, we've already set our project to the activity file folder for our first activity that we did. So the good news is we don't have to set it again. We would only have to set it to something else if we were working on something else. So since we're still doing activities, we don't have to set the project again. But if you want to, again, practice makes perfect, so always a good idea to replicate anything you are struggling with. So again, setting the project is File, Set Project. I immediately go to my Documents folder where I put all my stuff. I go to my 3DF folder where I put all my 3DF stuff. And within that, I have my activity file folders, my asset file folders, as well as my skill check file folders. But I'm working on my activity files, so I click one time on my activity file folder. I don't double click and go inside. I only need to select it and then use the Set button. Now my project is set. Now I open the scene. File, Open Scene. And then the one I want for here is my blockout activity, yes. And I hit Open. It'll ask me if I want to save this. And the answer is no. I want to work on this some more and get better, so there's no need to save it with my current progress. If you want to save it, you can. And what you would do to save it is go to File, Save Scene As, and then you can call it whatever you want. But something to bear in mind when you're saving your files, take a look at what the original file was saved as. You'll notice that this is an MA file, or a Maya ASCII. You see it says .ma at the end. Interesting thing about Maya 2017 with some of the files we're working with, they will only save if you save the file with the same file type as the original. So you'll notice the original is an MA. When I go to save the file, I can call it whatever, but by default it saves as Maya binary. If I try to save it as a binary, it's not going to save because it's a different file type. The original is an ASCII. So what I'll have to do is, when I get down here to the file type, switch it from binary to ASCII. And then it will actually be able to save with no problems. All right? Now, how much you want to bet I'm going to get a question on that? So, again, if you take a look at my images, you'll see this is the goal. All right? I've got a pencil, a chair, a mailbox, and a lamp. And yeah, it's a huge pencil. And here are my image planes that I'm going to use for reference. These two image planes look very similar, and they are fairly similar, but trust me, they are distinctly different. And the critical thing for you to understand is make sure that your models, the geometry, matches the silhouette in both images before you move on. So I'm going to do the first one for you. So watch me. I'm going to do the pencil, and then you guys can do the rest of them. So first things first. This first image here is a pencil. If I was going to draw a pencil, what simple volume would I start with? What would I start with if I was drawing a pencil? Cylinder, right? Because that's most of the volume I need. So if I'm going to model a pencil, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start with a cylinder. So I come up here to cylinder and I click on it. All right, so now I've got a cylinder. I'm going to move it into place. I'm going to line it up roughly with my pencil. Now you'll notice it looks like it's lined up. You know, it's not the right size yet, but it's lined up with my pencil. But when I look in this other view, not even close. Again, it's got to be lined up in both views. So when it's lined up here and it's lined up here, I know it's in the right place in 3D space. All right, now, if I want to change the size and shape of this cylinder to make it match this pencil, there's a lot of different tools I could use, but I'm going to use the scale tool. Now it's true, if I scale my pencil on the x-axis, I can scale it to match my object. But take a look at this. Is that what a pencil looks like? No, that's not what pencils look like, right? It looks right here, but you can see in terms of what I did, I only scaled on the x-axis, and that's why it looks like it's squashed. So rather than scaling on the x-axis, I'm going to scale from the middle cube, and that will maintain proportion. So I scale it, and then now it's matching. And if you look at it out here, you'll notice, oh yeah, it's still round like a pencil should be. So I've got what looks like a pencil here. Well, I need to move it over a little bit. Again, line it up here, make sure it looks good here, then I know it's good out here. Now, the pencil's a little too short, so again, I'm going to use my scale tool and make it longer. All right? Hey guys, if you have a question, please ask me. I would love the questions to run sort of north and south. I'm glad you guys are helping each other, but in the phase where I'm sort of describing what we're doing, it's much better if we do front to back questions rather than side to side. Does that make sense? When we get into it, please, by all means, help each other. But let's try to keep it an environment where everybody can hear. All right. Yes, go ahead.
Could we also use a cube?
You could use a cube, but that's going to be slower in terms of achieving the final shape you're going for. Because the truth of the matter is, you could start with pretty much any shape you want and eventually get there. But as I said before, we are creating art, but we're on a timeline. And that's the scary part. And that's what I mean when I say art for hire. Art for hire means you do it the way they want you to do it within the time frame that they ask for it, even if it's ridiculous, or you're not going to be working there. It's that simple. So while it is true you could start with a cube and make this pencil, it's going to take you a lot longer to get there. And again, if I can teach you anything, I'm hoping it'll be a more speedy workflow, because they don't really care. And this is honestly probably one of the biggest tragedies of art for hire. They don't care about the fact that it looks right. You know, that's the given. The fact that it's beautiful, the fact that it's perfect, the fact that it is exactly what they asked for, that's the given. That's expected. Does that make sense? It's terrible, but that's what they expect. That's why you get glitches. That's why you get problems. But the bottom line is speed. I've got to do a great job, but I have to do it fast. Because you can be the best modeler that ever lived, but if you are slow, you are not employable. Does that make sense? So unfortunately, we got to work both of these. So we will talk all about efficiency. We will talk all about workflow and things that we can do to speed stuff up, because that's the difference between being employable and not being employable. And again, it's a tragedy. And if you're wondering, well, how could they figure that out? I mean, they're looking at my work. They say it's beautiful. They're going to hire me and then find out I'm slow. It won't matter. And that's not how it works. If they like your work, they invite you to take what they call an art test. And what happens is they will have a bunch of people submit their portfolios. They will look at everybody's work and say, hey, this person, and this person have nice looking portfolios. Let's invite them to do an art test. And what they'll do is they'll tell you, hey, I want you to build me a Sherman tank. It can't be any more than 4,000 polygons. I want you to create it with two textures, 256 by 256. And it's got to have all the moving and functional parts. And you've got 48 hours to do it. Go. And everybody has to take this test. And it is a timed test. And then based on the result you give them, because you got to return the files to them, the file types that they asked for, the exact technical specifications they demand, there is no flexibility. And then based on what they get back, they decide who they're willing to give a phone call to. Does that make sense? That's the next step. They will find out if you are slow or not, because you won't be able to keep up with everybody else. Does that make sense? This is probably the only test or the only job you've ever had in your life where you have to take a test for. And that's if you get lucky enough to be chosen. Does that make sense? So we got to work on this stuff. Again, efficiency, paying attention to instruction, following details of even the most minute scale. These are all critical aspects of landing a job in this field, in addition to being tremendously lucky. Does that make sense? So we got to work the angles we can work. All right, so back to the question. Could you start with a cube? Yes, you could, but that is the slower path. It is much easier if I start with a cylinder, because that occupies most of what I need right out of the box. So I've got this first piece of my pencil in here. Again, it looks good in this view. I check my other view, looks good there, so I know I can proceed to the next detail. All right, now my next detail, if you look at the pencil, is this sort of metal collar here. And basically what this does is crimps the eraser to the wood of the pencil. That's its job. So since it is a cylinder, again, I could make another cylinder and start working with that, right? Here's another cylinder. You can make as many as you want. There's no charge. However, when it comes to cylinders, this one is pretty close to the right size, and it's already really close to where I want it to be. So rather than make a brand new cylinder, why not duplicate this one? So the process for duplicating geometry, you select the geometry in object mode, got to be selected, got to be object mode, and you go to edit, duplicate. And that will literally make you an exact copy of what you have already made. Now it's kind of deceiving because you can't see it, because literally one piece is right on top of the other. So you would never know you made that duplicate, but it is in there when you do it. So this one, I'm just going to scoot up a little bit, and it's obviously way too big. So I'm going to scale it way down. I'm going to move it into position here. All right, and it's not big enough. So I'm going to, again, scale from the middle to give me sort of a larger shape. All right, looks good here. Let me check my other view. Looks pretty good here. These images aren't exactly perfect, you know, welcome to reality. So I'm going to have to hedge my bets if it doesn't match. Do my best to figure out where it needs to be. Okay. Now, next cylinder that I need is this eraser bit here. Again, I've already got a cylinder that's near the right size, and it's in the right location almost as well. So why not duplicate it? Again, edit, duplicate. Bring it up into position using my scale tool. Scale it down a little bit. Move it up so that it occupies the right space. Again, go to this view, make sure I'm doing the same thing over here. If it looks good here and it looks good here, I know things are lining up out here. Now, last little bit of detail on my pencil is this tip down here. And actually, I gotta move this down a little bit too. I'm missing a little bit of my pencil. Okay. Now, this bit down here looks the most like a cone in terms of my simple primitives. So what I'm going to do is come over to my cone, click on that, right? Here's my cone, but what's wrong with it? Too big, right? I got to make it a little bit smaller, and it's upside down, right? It's facing the wrong way. So I'm going to use my rotate tool to rotate this bad boy, and I'm going to move it 180 degrees, and then I'm going to use my scale tool to make it smaller. And then all I'm going to do is put it into place, right? And I'll use my scale tool, stretch it out a little bit there. Bring it into position. Go back to my scale tool, make it a little bit smaller. So it looks good here, but again, I got to check my other views and make sure. So if I go over here to this view, oh my goodness, it's not even close. It should be over here, and it's way over here. So if I go out here, you can see, oh yeah, not even close. That's why we use those two different cameras. So now I'm going to scoot this back in so that it matches over here. And when it looks good here and it looks good here, I know it's in the right place out here. So now I can write my epic novel because my pencil is done. So what I'd like you guys to do is we've got a chair, a mailbox, and a lamp for you to work with. And a couple of quick hints. In terms of the legs of the chair, you only have to make one leg of the chair, and then you can duplicate to make the leg in the back. And then you can grab both the front and the back and duplicate those to make the other side, right? And those are all cubes. Also, in terms of these shapes, the lamp here, the lamp shade is a cylinder, and the body of the lamp is a sphere, an elongated sphere. So just to help you out in terms of your polygon choice. So again, as we did before, Brian and I are going to walk around and see how you guys are doing. Please ask questions, and as always, jot stuff down. If there was a piece of information you're missing, you don't want to be missing that information, so make sure you've got it. All right? So we'll walk around and see how you guys are doing with this activity, and then the next thing we will talk about will be your skill check, which is a culmination of what we discussed today. What's that? I don't think today. I think that's tomorrow. I think it's tomorrow.
Cool. Yeah.
If not, I will though, because they need it for week 1.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yep. No, absolutely. How's it going?
I accidentally somehow made this a depth camera instead of perspective.
Oh, that's okay. If you need to switch it, just go to panels, go to perspective, and you can choose perspective or, you know, whatever you need. Yep. All the other cameras there. No, you're welcome. How's it going? Good? Good? Excellent. No need to extrude, but good. Working on the jar. How's it going? If you hit spacebar over any window, it maximizes that window. So put your cursor, boom. See how that works? Isn't that great? Go to File, Open Scene. Oh, well, without a mouse, it's kind of difficult, but if you zoom out a little bit, 2 fingers and push away, select the next one and press F, and then you'll zoom in on that one. Nice job. Banging out those pencils. How you guys doing?
Let's do folder code of Exodus.
This is the blockout activity.
Block.
Yeah, so you just choose blockout. Yep.
Alright, I got it.
And then open.
I-
Don't save. Continue. And then there'll be like 2 OKs. There you go. Now, if you look at your 2 orthographic views, that's what you're going to use. So hit spacebar to go out. There you go. So these are the ones you're going to use to line up the primitives. Okie doke? Great.
Mine's for want to show up there. This way. This up here.
Oh, your shelves. Okay, let's do this. Minimize Maya a little bit.
Small.
Yes, hit the green button. There you go. Now go to Maya, Preferences, and then up here, Restore Default. Oop, under Edit, yep. Restore Default, and then hit Save. Make sense? You're back in business. And just make sure you choose the Polygon tab. There you go. Good job. Everybody's on the right file. Excellent. Good. Yeah, make sure you're using the orthographic views to line stuff
Is
up.
this
Yeah.
like the way I'm doing this geometry? Is that an okay way, or is that like incorrect? Like how I just keep adding like.
Well, it's really dense,
Okay.
and you could make that detail with a lot less geometry.
Okay.
What I would recommend you do is rather than put all those edges this direction,
Start putting some like.
if they went this way, because what you could do is extrude, 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 and that would give you the same curvature, and you wouldn't have all those edges in that direction.
Okay. Should I take out these ones, or should I leave them and just start doing the rest of them in like the other way?
To be honest with you, I would probably start that piece again.
Okay.
Yep. I mean, you can keep that piece, hide it, put it on a layer and hide it or whatever, but I would start that one again.
So go to layers.
New layer,
This is my
New layer.
create new layer.
Okay.
All right. Select this in object mode, and then over here,
Mhm.
select that layer,
Mhm.
right mouse button, add selected objects. There you go. Now if you hit the V, you're welcome. How we doing? Good?
Well, actually,
Mm-hmm.
number one, right? This picture, it's not like, I don't know, they're not on the same thing. 'Cause
No,
they're-
it might not be 100% lined up. Yeah, you might have to
line up myself.
do your best to line it up. Yeah, absolutely. You may have to like sort of go between the 2 images, just hedge your bets between it, you know what I mean? And then place it, but they are pretty close. Yeah, well, you need a mouse or the pen from your tablet for sure. Tablet. You guys were issued a tablet for this class? Yeah, you got to go to distribution to pick it up. See this nice tablet and pen?
You can use the touchpad.
Yep. Yeah, the touchpad is just short of a living hell, though. You definitely want to get. And I gotta be honest with you. I am glad that you're trying to do your assignments, but you really should be doing the stuff that we're doing in class at the time.
Oh, no, I just loaded this because you was
Oh,
asking
okay.
how to load it up.
Oh,
So
okay.
I pulled this up to show
Oh,
you
okay.
so that
Just
that's-
make sure you're working on what we're working on, because like I said, there's steps in a ladder, and if you're trying to go 9 steps ahead, but you don't know how to crawl, you're not gonna be able to do it. You know what I mean? It's more
the
frustrating.
lecture you missed, he does YouTube videos.
Yep. Good. How's it going? Yes. I'll come right back. Mm-hmm.
How to make this to here, and
Mhm.
if I move this way, it cannot be moved.
Well,
If there are only such as
all right. And it is a little bit easier to work in shaded mode than in wireframe. Do you remember the difference between the two and what key you pressed to change it? Yes. 4 and 5.
this one.
Yeah. A little bit easier. You know what I mean? When it's shaded.
I mean, if I want to here, and I just want to move this line, not this line.
Mm-hmm.
How to set?
Well, you can grab the components on that end and move them all, but we didn't really get into that yet. So just move it up and then scale it, and it'll go in both directions at one time. Does that make sense? You just kind of have to cheat it a little bit as you move. Because that's not the control. You got to stop thinking 3D Studio Max. Edit, duplicate. No, edit, duplicate. This is Maya, different application. Edit, duplicate. Or Command D.
Oh, yeah. When I was a kid, the song was How You.
Good job. Yes.
Question. I just came back from. I walked it. Can I run to the bathroom real quick?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You don't even have to ask. If you need to go to the bathroom, go ahead and go. Yes. Okay. Just don't be gone too long. Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to. I'm having. Using this is still.
Mm-hmm. That's okay.
I'm trying to get just that nice little lip there, but I keep running into errors.
Okay. Well, what you're going to need to do, there's different ways you could accomplish that. You could do that with Insert Edge Loop tool. You could do that with the Extrude tool. It's easier with the Extrude tool.
Really?
Yes, by a long shot. Yeah. If you, for example, select one face there, go to face mode and select it. All right. Select one face. All right. Now hold Shift and double click the one right next to it. All right. So now you have that whole row. Now do the extrusion. Well, don't switch to the move tool. That's where you went amok. Hit Z. Z again. Okay. Now double click on the face next to it. Click. Double click. Oops. Close. Click. Double click. Now go to the extrude tool, but don't switch to your move tool. Grab the X axis and pull it out. The red one. Wait, hit Z. Tumble it a little bit. Tumble your view. Oh, I'm sorry. Grab the Z axis, the blue one, blue arrow, and pull it out. No, other way.
I went for what I got to do.
Well, I thought you were making this lip detail down here. But in or out doesn't make any difference. They both do the same thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so they're trying to evolution just straight.
Mm-hmm. How are you doing? Good, nice pencil. Yep, it just takes practice. That's the good news. You just got to get over that first part because it's really frustrating. Learning how to use Maya is a lesson in humility. Big time. All right. Very good. I'm liking what I'm seeing. You guys are definitely making some good progress. Any of these activity files, as I've said before, if you feel like you want more time with them, you want more practice with them, you didn't feel it was very smooth or whatever, that's what these things are for. They're just practice for you guys. It's like going to the batting cages. It doesn't count for anything. It just helps you get better. So if you want to, open these files up again when you get to lab. Open these files up again when you go to the open lab, the Google Hangout. Just practice there. That's how you're going to get better. And like I said, if I could get you guys to work in teams, I would, because that's really definitely beneficial to work in that kind of group environment. Everybody remembers something. And I got to be honest with you, when you have to teach somebody else how to do something, you learn it better. So it's actually dual purpose. You are helping others, which makes you feel fuzzy inside, but it also helps you get better at what you do, which is amazing. Anyway, we're going to talk about our skill check, which is basically a culmination of everything we've learned how to do today. So this is the skill check for lecture 2. I'm going to show you how it works and what it looks like, and then you can make the necessary adjustments. All right, so in terms of the skill check, we have talked about the idea that the skill check is different than our activity files. These are our skill checks, so that's a separate file folder. So since I'm switching gears, I'm going to have to set my project accordingly. So here I am in Maya, and I go to File, Set Project, and I'm going to go to my skill check file folder and select that. Again, just the outer one. I'm not going to go into that folder. I just want to select the outer one, skill check, set. Now I go to File, Open Scene. And then within there, you'll see a file called jar asset start. That's the file I want to start with. So I open it up. Now, when you get the jar asset start, you will see that there's some images in there, and this is what we're using as our reference. Instead of just a silhouette, we've got an actual picture. This is going to make things easier for us. So in terms of matching what we see, the process is identical to what we were just doing. We are blocking out this jar. So we're looking for the simple shapes we see, and we try to recreate it using the primitives. So if I was going to draw this jar, what would I start with? A cylinder. So if I'm going to model it, same thing. I'm going to start with a cylinder. So I create a cylinder, and I'm going to line it up with my image in my image plane. It's a little bit small, so I switch to my scale tool, and I scale from the middle because I don't want to change the shape of the cylinder. I just want to change how big it is. Now, in terms of lining up geometry, it was kind of easy when we were working with the silhouette to leave our geometry either in shaded mode, which is 5, or if you needed to, you could press 4 for wireframe mode. But sometimes it's hard to see the wireframe, and to be honest with you, I'm a very visual guy. I like to see the picture and the geometry. So what I can do, which is very, very handy, is if you go to your panel menu, if you go under shading in terms of the menu item there, and from that drop down choose X-ray mode, what this will do is allow you to see both the geometry as well as the image behind. So this is extremely helpful when it comes to modeling. So again, I'm going to line this thing up, and because I can see through my geometry using that X-ray mode, it's just a little bit easier for me to place my jar. And again, I want to go to my other view and make sure that's lining up. And you'll see that this window, this panel, has its own menu, and I'll have to go to shading and choose X-ray here as well to turn it on, because it doesn't turn it on in all views. So you turn it on in the views you want it in. And again, I need to scoot this over to make it match. Shading, X-ray. Okay, so now I'm ready to go. Now this cylinder is a little bit too short, so I'm going to scale it to make it bigger. Right, place it in there. Now the next biggest detail that I'm looking at for this jar is sort of this lip. It sort of flares out almost like a trumpet or something. So in looking at what I've got to work with, the cone is really my closest shape. So I'm going to hit cone and make one of those. And automatically this is in X-ray mode also. Just whatever geometry is in this view, I will be able to see through. So the cone is great, but it needs to be flipped over. So I'm going to flip it over 180 degrees. And then of course I want to scale it and make it fit. So I'm going to scoot it down in here. And it looks like I got to move it over some. And it helps to get very, very close with whatever you are modeling so that you can get a nice view of it. Line things up as well as possible. All right, so that's lined up pretty good there. I got to go to my other view and see how that looks. And it's not bad. I need to kind of scoot it over a little bit this way. All right, looks good here. Looks good here. Okay, then it must be lining up pretty well out here. Now, the next detail, the next smallest detail, is this kind of lip right here that I've got going on. And I could take a sphere and sort of make that big enough to occupy that area and then squash it down. And that will kind of give me that lip there in terms of the shape I'm looking for. But really a better fit is the torus or donut polygon, as I call it. Click on that guy, slide it up into position, and then using the scale tool in the middle, scale it out. And I need to move it over a little bit. And then I'm going to use my scale tool to kind of squash it down. And it does a much better job, I think, of filling that shape. And again, I want to make sure it works in all my views. All right, looks good here, looks good here. Then I know I'm good to go out here. Now it's true, this is a jar, which means it's supposed to be hollow, but we haven't gone into any of those tools yet. I don't expect you to do that. That's fine. By next class, we'll get into how do we make it hollow inside. But at this point, that occupies the shape and the form that you know how to do, and this is all I would expect from you for this assignment. All right? So make sure you get that all scaled up and or make sure you get that all blocked out and looking good. And then what you would want to do is save this file. Now remember, in terms of saving files, if the original is an MA, which this one is, that means I've got to save it as an MA. So when I want to save it, I go to File, Save Scene As, and you'll see it defaults to MB or Maya binary. So I'm going to have to click the drop down and choose Maya ASCII to make it the right type. I can't just type MA at the end. That doesn't make it an MA file. Does that make sense? You have to actually save it in that variety. And then here's where I'm going to get to be able to name it. And in terms of the naming, you will see that we have a very specific naming convention, not only for this class, but for this entire school. And again, the importance of naming things properly goes largely unappreciated, especially when you're in a production pipeline. But we're trying to get you guys into good habits. We're trying to get you guys to name things and follow direction with regard to naming. So naming the file is actually worth almost 10 points in many instances. So literally you can go from an A to a B because you didn't name the file properly. Does that make sense? Don't lose points over silly stuff. This stuff is so straightforward. Lose points over the hard stuff. So in terms of naming, the naming convention, again, for this class and the school in its entirety is last name, underscore, first name, underscore, whatever this thing happens to be. And this is my Lecture 2 skill check. So it's actually going to have that name. Lecture 2 skill check. All right? And underscore what class you're in. This is 3DF. So we call it 3DF. Underscore, and then the last little bit of information is the year and month you took the class. It is the year 2018, and it is the third month. I know, well, it actually is the third month today, but it's the third month. So we're 18 for 2018, and then 03 for March. This file has been named properly. It's going to get full credit. Does that make sense? Every assignment has a specific name using this convention, and the name for each assignment, what you're supposed to save it as, is at the bottom of the assignment. So if you scroll down, I'm not trying to trick anybody. It's there. You will only miss it if you ignore it. So make sure you're looking at the names we're asking for, because that is a decent chunk of the grade. So Make sure you're doing that stuff, and then you just hit save and you're good to go. Does that make sense? And that's all you need to do for skill check 2, what you just saw me do. So not that bad, but trust me, it gets crazy fast. So get these simple skills under your belt so that when we get into the crazier stuff, you're not feeling so overwhelmed. There's a lot to learn, and it will snowball on you quickly if you don't keep up. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, good. So again, that's all I wanted to talk about today. We're done a tiny bit early, which is good. 2? I'll take it. Yeah, because there's another class coming in. So do me a favor. If you need to save something, go ahead and save it. But start packing up your gear and get ready to scoot because we've got to let the next class in, and this is their space. So we have to give it back to them. But I will be in lab today for a while, and Marcus and Sarah are always in lab. So let's make sure we're talking to those folks and asking questions and writing stuff down. There's always something to do. You should never be idle. Never, never. There's always something. So I'll see you guys over there. Thank you very much. This was a good lecture. We learned a lot today. So let's keep that going. See you guys on Saturday. Yes, you should. Yep. All righty. Thank you, everybody. Oh, you're very welcome. Yeah, I have invisible faces. But yeah, the problem is sometimes you just write it in and sign next to it. Sometimes the face has the width. We didn't talk about it yet, but faces are sometimes accidentally created that have the width of an edge, so it looks